when it was at 38 ng per dl deciliter. I would do one set of a lift, like deadlift, and I'd be smoked, and I'd be so sore that I couldn't do any more sets.
What's up, guys? Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're going to be reacting to Pete Rubish again. So if you remember, I did a video a few weeks ago called he took steroids for 9 years, came off, and this is what happened, or something like that. So Pete is a very accomplished power lifter, and he had, abused, trenbolone and a bunch of other, steroids for many years, and, decided to come off cold turkey. And he ended up doing a PCT, which was, by blood work, metrics, unsuccessful. Again, though, in that video, I speculated on why it was unsuccessful, the duration of time post, hormone clearance, etc. And he has some follow-up blood work, which is about, when this video is published, I imagine over a week old at this point. But this is the most recent update I have here, and we are going to be going over it. Let's see if he is still indeed in the gutter, because he had essentially crashed, or like very, very low gonadotropins, very low T levels, despite the fact that he did, what he elaborated on as a, full PCT. Like, he literally came off the shit, did a PCT, and still had trash T levels. So, it makes you kind of question, if you take steroids for years on end, are you actually going to be able to recover? Like everyone seems to imply, oh, it's, impossible for you to not recover eventually if you just give yourself enough time. Is that actually the case? So this is going to be a good example of, what is going on with a guy who's, still pretty young, but he blasted shit for almost a decade. So not blasted straight, like blasting crews, blah, blah, blah. And he used pretty fucking high dosages. So here we're going to get into it.
Okay, guys, so here we have the 90-day post-testosterone blood work.
I'm going to put him on 1.25 times speed, and I'll just talk faster.
I'm actually at 95 days post-testosterone right now, but this is from day 90. I'm going to get this done every month over the course of this whole year.
So remember, when it comes to long ester tests, you're looking at a clearance time of, like, what's the half-life of, let's just say an anthate, which is probably what he was using. Like 7-10 days, something of that nature. It varies depending on the carrier oil, depending on the person, depending on, numerous factors. But in general, the clearance time is not going to be 14 days like is often talked about in the bro forums and shit, or like the old, bro lore PCT regimens where you take 2 weeks off and you start PCT no matter what long ester compound you come off of. With Test E in particular, like, you're probably looking at least more than a few weeks, dude. Like, it's not 2. It's certainly longer than that. You have at least 5 half-lives before you would even be put in a position where your body would not be so suppressed by the compound that you would then actually be able to have that HPTA kick back up and respond and start actually doing natural processes again. So, a lot of people, and I mentioned in the first one, highly underestimate how long these lingering effects can last in your system, because you have to keep in mind, too, some of the downstream metabolites of this shit linger a lot longer. Like, for example, testosterone aromatizing into estradiol. That is the main thing that has the negative feedback with the HPTA. It's not just the androgen receptor activation, it's the estrogen receptor too. So there's like downstream shit. We're not just talking about the T clearing. We're talking about everything else too that is giving that negative feedback to the HPTA.
To see how things rebound. So, notable things I should say right off the bat here. I am not on HCG. I'm not on HMG. And I've not been on either one of those in about a month. I'm not on Clomid or Novadex or Arimidex. I haven't been on either of those in about a month. I should say the HCG and HMG I haven't been on in about 2 months. But the Clomid and Novadex I haven't been on in about a month. So I'm not even on any more PCT drugs. I'm on nothing but natural supplements. I'm taking Tudka, kidney support, and iron from Leviathan Nutrition. I'm taking vitamin D, D3, vitamin K2, and NAC, N-acetylcysteine. I believe that's all the things I'm on right now. So here's what we got. Also, I've lost it. I should make note before I say this. I've lost 22 pounds from when I came off testosterone. I'm down to 230 pounds body weight. It's basically 104, 105 kilos. And a lot of this is from dieting. I've been trying to diet down to start competing in the 220 weight class so I can be healthier and not have sleep apnea. Because I had quite bad sleep apnea, which was amplified by heavier body weights and then anabolics. So I can run lighter cycles, much more mild cycles. I can compete much healthier, and I can not have sleep apnea at 220. So it's a no-brainer for me.
Okay. One thing I should mention, which, you know, it's obviously a good plan, but if you have sleep apnea, the goal, like obviously getting to a lighter body weight that isn't going to exacerbate the sleep apnea is a great plan. Anyone should do that who's watching, who's into the shit, bodybuilding, but also wants to, you know, be healthier rather than just get as massive as possible. But trying to get to that lower body weight to get rid of the sleep apnea, don't just come at it from that angle. Get on the CPAP. The CPAP is what's going to save your life. Just because you're trying to downsize, it doesn't mean you should avoid the CPAP because you're trying to get to a point where you hopefully don't have sleep apnea. The severity of your sleep apnea is going to get less and less and less, and maybe it gets to a point where it's not problematic at all, but you should be on a CPAP like right fucking now, like regardless. And frankly, even if I got down to 220 from like 260 or whatever he was at, and the sleep apnea was like barely even recognizable by my significant other at that time, I would still be using the CPAP because I wouldn't trust it, dude. Like if you have sleep apnea at all, it's not like a on or off switch. It's like the severity increases exponentially as you gain weight and decreases, you know, as you lose weight. But if I was 220 lean, I would not be super confident that it was totally gone. And that's why even when I get, you know, like totally shredded and I don't really have like, you know, that bad of sleep apnea, I still use the CPAP machine. Granted, I actually still have sleep apnea, so that's kind of a bad example, like even when I'm like totally lean. But like I would still use it, like, you know, being proactive about it, being extra careful. This is the kind of thing that the silent killer of bodybuilders, you know, a lot of people talk about, you know, blood pressure management, things of this nature, but barely anyone talks about sleep apnea for some reason, even though tons of bodybuilders have it and do fucking nothing about it. It will literally take decades off your life.
So I still have 10 pounds to lose, but that'll be 33 pounds lost at that point, or 32 pounds lost since I came off testosterone. And it will also be 42 pounds from my peak weight last year of 262. So here's what we got. My glucose was again 89, which is what it was in the last blood work from day 60. I'm not happy with this. I would like to get my fasted glucose down. This was fasted. 89 isn't horrible, but it could be better. So maybe Derek or Leo will throw some suggestions on that. I think Leo has said in the past that fasting for 24-hour periods once a week, if not longer, will definitely impact your insulin sensitivity.
Yeah, I would circle back and look at the diet model though, mostly, you know, your cardio regimen, not just, you know, weightlifting, but cardio. You know, it's kind of hard to like really say like, oh, your glucose levels are horrible when you have like no test, you know? Like what is the main thing that is going to prevent like diabetes and shit? It's like actual muscle tissue and things that are gonna like use up the glucose, you know? So when you have like crash T levels and your muscle mass is literally like falling off you by the day, it's kind of hard to take the number of the glucose number and be like, you know what, like this is what you need to fix when you have not even reached homeostasis with your androgen production. So I would sort of be like, you know, keep the diet tight, obviously, you know, don't get fat if you can, but you know, it's easier said than done when you have like fucking like 20 nanogram per deciliter test levels or whatever it was. But some of these numbers like temporarily are not going to be the best because it's not like you have these supporting hormones to keep them at an optimal level. So, you know, the fasting glucose of 89 with like no test, I'm not like overly concerned with it. I would rather see like where it's at with the same diet model once you know, restore androgen production to homeostasis and then see, okay, am I still unable to use up glucose properly and actually, you know, facilitate a healthy system. So, you know, it's not the best, but you have to keep in mind like what you're dealing with.
And help with bringing fasted glucose down. Kidney functions, BUN was 21. I believe it was 20 on the last one. Creatinine was 1.11, which is, it's never been that low in my entire life. That's why, I mean, as long as I've been getting blood work done. So 1.11, it was 1.19 on the 60-day lab results. And then GFR was 89, whereas it was 82 on the last lab results. Both of those have improved. You want your creatinine to be as low as possible. You want your GFR to be as high as possible. So I believe these are accurate metrics for me now because I'm not carrying a ton of muscle mass compared to before. I'm not like...
Okay, the GFR, I'm telling you, is not going to be accurate. You're fucking you're like 220, 230 with a lot of muscle. But, you know, this is obviously better. I'm just saying, like, as far as a creatinine calculated EGFR is never accurate for a guy of your size. You know, this is not, a cystatin C calculated EGFR would be more appropriate. And that's just, you know, how it works. Like, the gold standard is an inulin clearance test, and the only test that can match that in accuracy via blood work is going to be the cystatin C calculated estimated glomerular filtration rate. So that is what I would be using if you wanted like a really accurate picture, but I would speculate that your GFR is fine, to be honest.
Jack to the hilt anymore or anything like that, but for bodybuilders and such, it may not be accurate. But anyway, that shows that the kidney support from Leviathan Nutrition has worked pretty well, as it decreased my creatinine to the lowest it's ever been and raised my GFR the highest it's ever been. Then we've got electrolytes all in the normal range. Honestly, I couldn't tell you what globulin means, but that is low. So,
yeah, like I don't really know either, to be honest. Like I would, it's not like it's that far off from the reference range, but like as far as I recall, it can be associated with like malnutrition and things that I don't really know if it would be relevant. Like I think it's one of those things where transiently, like I would get it checked again, and if the second time it is still the same, then I would kind of dig further. But you know, it's not uncommon to have blood tests where you'll have like one random biomarker thrown off for like no apparent reason whatsoever, and you're symptom free, and then you do a follow-up and it's totally corrected itself. So you know, I feel like if you dug into this, you might be getting into like Google, like scare yourself territory where it's like, oh, you obviously have kidney disease. Oh, you definitely have a fucking liver tumor or something. So, you know, I'd probably just get it tested again in the future, in the near future, during your next blood test, which it will be included in your metabolic panel, obviously. And then you can see if it's there again. At that point, I would look into it further, but this is probably just like a random aberration in my opinion.
the more important things down here, AST and ALT. So AST was 45, ALT was 48 on the last blood panel from day 60. So the difference here, I took 300 milligrams of TUDCA every day from Leviathan Nutrition, and that brought me down almost in, more than half. So cut my liver enzymes in half to very good numbers here. This is the lowest my liver enzymes have ever been as well. The big one you're seeing here, though, that everybody came to see, my test has more than quadrupled. My test has gone up almost 4.5 times from what it was 30 days ago.
Wow. So yeah, he was at like, I don't remember, like 30 or something like that, which, is obviously not ideal. It was very low, especially when he had completed what he thought to be a pretty comprehensive PCT protocol. Like obviously if you go back and look at it, it wasn't like super comprehensive, but he used like a full spectrum of things. Like he had used HCG, HMG, Clomid, Novadex, if I recall correctly, and then still nothing out of it. But again, you'd be circling back to the pharmacokinetics of the testosterone. How much was still lingering in the system? What about the downstream metabolites of that testosterone and its negative feedback with the HPTA, despite your test maybe clearing before that, So to me, this almost looks like he just needed more time because he's not on any PCT drugs now and he hasn't been on any. His last blood test was like, I don't recall the timeline, but I think it was like right after using like a full like gambit of shit, all designed to boost your T levels up. Like all like very potent PCT drugs. Now, obviously, I don't know if they were legit or not. Those could have been bunk for all we know. But anyways, the fact of the matter is he has like, over quadruple test levels now, despite being on absolutely nothing fertility related. So to me, that just indicates the HPTA needed more time, negative feedback. Lingered around a lot longer than you would predict based on, the traditional Broforum, wait 2 weeks and start PCT.
Without taking any PCT drugs, no Clomid, no HCG, nothing of the sort. So that is interesting. That I was expecting it to be about 75, have doubled or so, but to go up 4.5 times was not what I was expecting, especially not being on anything. And I noticed, I'm like, it has to have gone up because when it was at 38 ng per DL deciliter,
he's laughing because in the last one he didn't remember what it was, and like I think a few people shit on him in the comment section.
I would do one set of a lift, like deadlift, and I'd be smoked, and I'd be so sore that I couldn't do any more sets. And now I'm doing like 4 sets that are heavy, high reps, no problem. So I knew my recovery was way better. I could get a lot more done during a given session, so I knew it had to have gone up. So this is an interesting predicament. My estradiol is still below 15. I think rather than, I talked to Leo, and for the sake of restoring fertility, He suggests obviously doing RFSH and HCG and Clomid, or actually, I think it's called E-clomiphene citrate.
Okay, so he's talking about HCG for stimulating the Leydig cells, recombinant FSH to stimulate the Sertoli cells, and N-clomiphene citrate to selectively occupy estrogen receptors. So clomiphene produces two compounds known as zooclomiphene and N-clomiphene. And N-clomiphene, based on all the data that we have seen, seems to be a far superior compound in general, whereas, Clomid containing both of those metabolites, if you want to call them that, it's a lot more problematic and side effect ridden. So when you have this more selective version, analog, whatever you want to call it, it's not only better for, restoring fertility, but with the relative lack of side effects it produces in contrast to the combo of N-clomiphene with zooclomiphene. The zooclomiphene is less favorable and far more side effect ridden. So, Clomid, despite it being a, very traditionally used compound, N-clomiphene is a more modern approach to post-psychotherapy practices, in my opinion. So that SERM overall, and a lot of people in the community regard it as one of the most forward-thinking SERMs you could deploy as a post-psychotherapy regimen. And above and beyond that too, as far as actual activity at the receptor site, N-clomiphene acts as a, it's like a more pure antagonist, whereas zooclomiphene can actually agonize the estrogen receptor and induce negative feedback. So it's almost like sort of like that stereoisomer of the main Clomid parent compound is almost counterproductive in a sense relative to the N-clomiphene stereoisomer, which is producing the effects that you actually want to get out of the drug.
A little different version, but don't quote me on that. That's what he prefers to do, but we talked before I got these labs back. So I think I'm going to give it another month on nothing and see if things rebound even further. Because if things are rebounding, presumably I wouldn't need Clomid, HCG, and everything. But I'd love to hear Derek's input on this from more plates, more dates.
Yeah, so the thing I am interested in is the impact the crashed, obviously his E2 is still in the toilet because his test is so low. I'm interested that their reference range does not go below 15. It just says it's the laziest fucking estradiol test I've ever seen. Usually it will have at least a low end in the single digits, not just be oh, you're less than 15, so we're gonna not even fucking tell you what it is. So if I had a 14, I'd be a lot less concerned than if I had a 1, So it's how fucking crashed is it? That's what I would want to know.
He did an excellent breakdown of my last video of blood work. And I'm really curious to see what he has to say, because I don't know if anybody's ever really documented this too much, where they are on anabolic steroids for many years, and then they come off, and not even taking PCT drugs, everything starts rebounding. So I figured I'd still be shut down way further than 168 after 90 days, but here we are. Now, I should also show you FSH and LH. Let's highlight these. FSH went from 2.3 to 4.4, nearly doubled. LH more than doubled from 1.3 to 3.0. So again, I'm do I really need HCG and Clomid if things are bouncing back on their own? So I think we'll wait till the March 15th labs. We'll break it down. If things are continuing to go up, I'll ride this out. If not, for the sake of restoring fertility, we might go on HCG and Clomid and such.
Yeah, so that's a good point. His FSH and LH are higher. They're in the reference range. And do you need to introduce drugs into your system to try and artificially boost these up quicker when they seem to be trending up pretty fast on their own? Maybe not. So I would like to see the March 15th bloods and then reassess as well. If this were me, that's probably what I would be thinking too.
But I definitely would like Derek's opinion. I hope he can break this down. I've messaged him a little bit on Instagram. I have a few more questions for him, and I'm going to go over this with Leo as well. What happened with my hematocrit here? Hematocrit 39, which is almost lower than normal, which I've never been this low in my life. So when I was on anabolics, hematocrit was 50 to 51. And then on the last blood panel, it was 45. Now, I think I know what Derek's going to say. He's going to say,
okay, let's see if you're going to say what you think I'm going to say. Okay, so I would it's he wants my input, but he's about to fucking answer the question for me. So I would speculate, as I mentioned earlier, these things downstream have different, metabolites. You convert into DHT, you convert into estradiol. These things have their own inherent activity with different receptors and their own inherent, clearance times above and beyond the testosterone root androgen itself. And the turnover of red blood cells, the actual manufacture and, recycling of them, I guess. It's not like a fast, like overnight thing. So even if you have, let's just say, a low hematology profile, this is like indicative of stuff that's been happening for like several weeks prior, rather than like, you know, the way I would describe it as is if I started a giant blast phase with a shit ton of androgens, I would not see the reflection in the hematology panel increase for multiple weeks down the line. It would not be like an overnight thing where RBC just jumps up, hemoglobin jumps up, hematocrit is like through the fucking roof. This stuff would take time to happen. It's a multiple week process. So the opposite would apply too for when you're crashing and coming off of tests. It's not like overnight your red blood cell count crashes into nothingness. It would be a slow, like, you know, a reversal as these things kind of work their way out of your system, and the time frame of the, you know, hematology panel actually kind of like plays out. So I'm assuming that's what he's going to guess I'm going to say, because I can't think of what else I would possibly think of that he would think I think of, to be honest.
People, he told me over Instagram, he said people underestimate how long it takes for long esters to clear.
Oh yeah, I said that over Instagram too.
So perhaps in the last lab panel, I was still holding on to retaining some of the long ester effects from the testosterone.
Right. So yeah, like exactly. So even guys who are like cheating in pro sports, you know, you show up to an event, you know you're being tested on that day, you have no hormones in your system because you know you're going to get drug tested, but the residual effects of that stuff lingers. It's not like it just, you know, falls out of your system overnight because you don't have the androgen receptor activated anymore. A lot of these downstream satellite interactions with hematology, for example, last. And then, you know, you can drag it into a, you know, sporting event and actually reap the rewards or the benefits of your, you know, anabolics use from, you know, weeks prior, even though at that exact moment in time, you might have like nothing in your fucking system.
And now it's kind of completely gotten out of my system, and my hematocrit has dipped even lower to 39. That's just my guess, but I have no clue.
Thing that's good though is the fact that you have in range, like it's, you know, obviously it's on the low end, but I mean, the fact that you had like a 30 whatever test level and you're only at like 160 whatever right now, like you don't need a blood transfusion. So that's good news, you know, like obviously we want this to improve and get better, but I think it will improve as everything starts to recover. And it seems like everything's starting to exponentially increase now. So I'm not too concerned, and it's good that even at like your worst, this was not problematic enough where you needed to like, you know, go to the fucking ER or something.
So I'm going to be curious to hear what he has to say about that, because I don't think 39 hematocrit is a good thing. It probably means my blood pressure is very low, which is good, but I don't really want it to be 39. That means I'm going to get a lot more out of breath and winded and stuff training.
Yeah, but once your androgen profile bumps up more, that should improve. In addition to your estrogen bumping up, because your estrogen's crashed right now too. I don't actually know what it is because it won't fucking show me under 15 apparently. But you know, those things are all in unison going to increase, and I would speculate your hematology profile will increase alongside that.
So I really want to hear what he has to say about that. Now, I mentioned this before, my absolute eosinophils, which is a measure of your immune system, it's a type of white blood cell. So my absolute EOS was always elevated. Every single blood test I've ever had done in my entire life. And this is the first time my absolute EOS are in the normal range. So I'm doing something right here because my immune system has seemingly strengthened and my body is healthier, because this absolute eosinophils, a lot of people would overlook that. But for me, that has been elevated on every single blood test I've ever had done. And here we are, and it's finally in the normal range. This is the interesting one. I did not have this in the last lab panel, so I'd like to hear Derek's input on this as well. HDL cholesterol 45. I know that's not great. It's not terrible. It's not great. It's not simply said I have bad cholesterol genetics as far as my family history. We do not have a good history with cholesterol. This is on a fairly clean diet. Honestly, much cleaner than I've eaten before. I don't eat red meat. I'm eating ground turkey, egg whites, rice. That's about it. Drink water. And my LDL is still 125. So the lowest I've ever been with my LDL is 121, which means I don't even think much. It's all my fault. A lot of it is genetic. So Leo Rex of Leo and Longevity suggested I asked him about ezetimibe, and he said I could do that and stack it with a very mild statin, and that would probably bring me below 100. And he said you want to be below 70 ideally. So I may do that, but I definitely would like Derek's opinion on this as well. We'll see what he has to say.
You know, I often agree pretty much with what Leo says in regards to, like he's obviously going off of the, what he knows would work. You know, I'm sort of just speculating on how you would avoid having to use drugs that you might not want to use. Like some people don't want to use a mild statin, you know? Like obviously that would, do the trick though. So like if it were me, one thing I will say is about your HDL, your estrogen is in the toilet. So I would, I imagine this should improve. Like your lipid profile as a whole, I would think would improve when your estrogen starts to come up. Like a lot of people don't realize how cardioprotective estrogen is and how much of an impact it can have on certain lipid parameters. So for me, the HDL, I wouldn't be surprised if that, jumps up fairly significantly in the next couple of months here. The LDL, like you mentioned how you don't have eggs. I don't know what the rest of the diet is, if it's legitimately like high quality, like grass fed, like, I don't know, like bison and shit like that, and just rice and what was the other thing you said? I don't even remember, but egg whites and nothing else. That seems like there's no way that's all you're eating. Like I would think there's other shit in there. I don't know, man. Like it's hard for me to say, yeah, definitely go on a mild statin when I don't know what's going to happen with when you get back to natty T levels. Like you would know better than me what your baseline profile is with your blood work when you were like, pre-hormone use, if you have that. So I would, like before I would, go to that extreme, I would wonder what your natty baseline is for lipids, because I would not just make a judgment based on not having that information. Because for all I know, it's fine. Maybe some of the hormones are going to regulate this stuff to a large extent. Remember what I mentioned about having adequate testosterone levels for getting rid of, blood glucose and shit. Like this is stuff that is regulated by adequate testosterone levels. So yeah, like on paper, you would benefit probably from the implementation of what you just said, but I would like to see what happens, over the next few weeks here and how things kind of trend before I start introducing, other molecules that it becomes a lot harder to figure out what's going on when you're on multiple things. So I would rather get to a homeostasis baseline and then make a judgment call from there, personally. But yeah, obviously like something has to be done about the LDL in the presence of sufficient inflammation. So I would be looking at things like your C-reactive protein, to kind of determine, like, obviously everyone has their own stance on how problematic a high LDL is. If you want to be very, risk averse, you would probably at least want this below, like 100, I would think. Some people think 70 is like absolutely where it needs to be if you don't want to have any risk of plaque buildup whatsoever. I think it has more so to do with, I think everyone kind of understands already that, okay, when you have inflammation, that's when the LDL can be problematic. But who is actually inflammation free in their life? Who has a perfect fucking sleep hygiene, perfect diet model, perfect everything, where they're like totally absent of any of the factors that can cause that, plaque deposition. So I don't know, man. Like for me, my recommendation would be just fucking chill for a sec and like wait till things get to homeostasis and then make a judgment call from there. But like for all we know, maybe you need to do that. But the intervention, with your doctor, of course, with some sort of lipid modulating therapy. But for me, I would, if it were me, I'd just chill for now. And obviously I'd revisit the diet model because I don't actually know what the whole thing is.
But those are the notable things. That's really it. It covers everything. So LDL could use some work. I still think HDL could use some work. Glucose could use some work.
I think a lot of this stuff will kind of like auto-regulate itself though. The LDL we'll see, but I think the HDL and the glucose will probably auto-regulate itself.
Hematocrit, that's kind of interesting. And then test.
As well as the hematology.
Hematocrit, that's kind of interesting. And then test.
Okay, so for some reason the video just cuts off at 10 minutes, even though he's in the middle of a sentence. So I don't know, maybe the camera cut off or whatever, but that is basically my stance. Let's see what the comments say. Pretty crazy how the body can recover so fast after such a long time being on gear. Really interesting to see. Looking to getting a CPAP machine. I had bad sleep apnea, snoring at 240 pounds, even all the way down to 215. Sometimes dropping weight doesn't help. My low T was associated with my sleep apnea ever since I got a CPAP machine. Sleep and recovery has tremendously improved. The fact that he went through his whole powerlifting career without a CPAP, like, I'm wondering how much better his performance could have been if he used that thing. Probably wants it to go away naturally before having to use the machine, because once you get used to the machine, it's very hard to get off of one. I don't think so. I've been using a CPAP for a long time. I don't know, 7 years, 8 years, I don't even know. But I can still breathe when I'm not using it. It's just, I have apnea. If I'm like, I actually have it where it's like a structural thing. So if I'm sitting upright and I fall asleep, I actually don't apnea. It's when I fall asleep and I'm like lying on my back and my tongue sort of like falls into my throat and kind of fucks me up. That's when I need it. And you know, for me, like I go back to saying like you need to be on the CPAP the whole time. Even if you think you've got rid of it, the fact that you've had severe sleep apnea at a point, I would just be using it. I would just use it personally. See what anyone else said. Oh yeah, and obviously if you're fucking up your sleep with sleep apnea, you produce, you know, the majority of your hormone production is going to be regulated during any kind of recovery processes or during sleep. So I would definitely get on that ASAP personally. I would not wait until you get sleep apnea at 200 down from 220. If you have a yoked neck, you need a CPAP. Yup, my neck on the sauce exploded. Now it chokes me in my sleep, even off Sazul. It's funny, he must have got that from me. Yeah. A lot of people saying the word Sazul now. Love the podcast, Leo. Yeah, all right, so that is my stance. This video is getting kind of long, so I guess we will do perhaps an update when he has updated blood work, but we shall see. Thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplates28dates.com. Follow me on Instagram, @moreplates_more_dates. Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with. In the video description below, my TRT clinic. It's all telemedicine from the comfort of your own home. My recommended lab, tests, and diagnostics for staying on top of your health. My recommended nootropic formulas, Gorilla Mind, that I designed myself from scratch, as well as the Gorilla Mode pre-workout formulas and anything else I'm associated with. It's all in the video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.